What we've got is a very pure moment of authoritarian envy dressed up as a joke. And the interesting question, exactly as some newspapers have in fact suggested, is whether we read it as a childish tantrum because someone else commanded the room better, or as a kind of aspirational standard that Trump is holding up to his own people. At breakfast with Senate Republicans, Trump retells his meeting with President Xi in Busan. He lingers on one detail, not on trade or rare earths, but on posture. 6 men on either side of President Xi, standing rigid, silent, frightened. He repeats that he has never seen men so scared, and then says effectively, "I want that." That is already revealing. Out of an encounter between the two largest economies on earth, the thing President Trump wants to import is not semiconductor access, but fear. And is this jealousy or admiration, therefore? I think it is both. Jealousy because he's watching another leader monopolize attention in a way that he cannot. Admiration because he thinks that level of choreographed deference is the hallmark of serious power, because he doesn't understand what power actually is. Authoritarian systems are performative, they're theatrical. Their theatre teaches officials not to interrupt their sovereign. Anne Applebaum calls this the habit-forming side of autocracy. People learn silence because silence is safe. Trump is praising that habit, not the policy outcome. He then tries to reproduce the scene in miniature in front of American senators by turning on his own vice president. JD doesn't behave like that. JD butts into conversations. I want that for a couple of days. Vance, caught on camera, does the nervous imitation and sits up straight. It is low-grade humiliation administered publicly to show everyone else how the hierarchy works and who's in charge. So we can say we witnessed, or Trump witnessed a hierarchy, he envied it, and then he tried to stage it in miniature on J.D. Vance. So why it made people wince online? Because American cabinet government is supposed to be noisy. Presidents are meant to be primus inter pares, not the Sun King whose ministers freeze when spoken to. His remark, therefore, sounded less like comedy and more like a wish for personal rule for a cabinet that serves him, not the public. And that is why the clip was read as yet another piece of evidence of an authoritarian impulse by Trump. And we've seen this same impulse before, those long televised Trump cabinet meetings where secretaries take turns praising him. Critics at the same at the time said with some justice that North Korean leaders could hardly have asked for more lavish flattery. What we saw this week in the 2025 version of that, more brazen, because he now has a vice president who depends on his favour. That fits what Applebaum and Rachman have been saying this year. Second turns in office are often harsher because the ruler is more confident about pushing institutions aside. So the tantrum issue, was this a tantrum? Well, yes, he was irritated that in President Xi's presence he was not the sole gravitational centre. So he reasserted dominance in the only room he fully controls, a domestic Republican room. The jab at Vance becomes displacement. But he was also signalling to his team what proper loyalty looks like, I suppose. In other words, he was benchmarking American subordinates against Chinese political theatre and finding America wanting. Both at once can be true. Authoritarian envy often expresses itself as theatrical scolding. And what this story tells us about Trump's theory of leadership, there are 3 things, 3 elements stand out to me. 1, personal loyalty over subject matter expertise. Silent aids are preferable to ones that talk. What he really wants is one of those parades of the toy soldiers that you get in Radio City, all falling over when he says so. 2, fear is an administrative tool. The line "I've never seen men so scared" was not a criticism, it was praise. Fear equals efficiency in his imagination. He ought to go and talk to Mr. Putin if he can prise the Smeg fridge door open. The third point is imported authoritarian aesthetics. He likes the visual grammar of President Xi's system, and he wants to transpose it, or even though the US constitutional order is built to prevent that kind of choreography, he still wants it. This is very close to what scholars of personalist rule describe admiration across regimes for the techniques of control, even when the ideology is different. For Vance, this must have been very awkward. He has tried to be the articulate MAGA lieutenant, the one who can answer Zelensky, spar with reporters, manage TikTok talks, looking a little bit like a hamster, which is to say, not a mute ornament. Trump in public rebukes that very quality. That shows Vance the ceiling of his autonomy. It also shows Republican senators that even the vice president can be put in his place on camera. That is how you manufacture caution in a wider circle. I must say, there's a little bit of me which is quietly impressed with Trump's treatment of Vance. Some of his supporters were saying, well, he's just joking, because they need it to be a joke. If it's a joke, it's not a confession. But as we've seen with his praise of Putin, of Kim, and now President Xi, the line between jest and intention is very thin. He often uses humour to air-test authoritarian preferences. If the room laughs, the preference is normalised. So, what can we say? This was not simple buffoonery. It was a small tutorial in what Trump envies, a political space in which subordinates are afraid to speak, and a small rehearsal of that concept at J.D. Vance's expense. The embarrassment was real, but so was the aspiration, and that is why the clip matters.